what no one expected was that a nation celebrated for its faith, resilience, and warmth would be branded one of the most sinful nations of 2025. But here's the shocking truth. This isn't just about numbers or headlines. It's about centuries of buried history, systemic corruption, and cultural wounds that never truly healed. What forces turned paradise into a battleground of morality? And who really benefits from the chaos? Stay with us, because the truth you're about to uncover is more unsettling and more urgent than anyone dares to admit. It's 1521. The humid air of the Philippine Islands is thick with the scent of salt and damp earth. Fishermen pull in their nets at dawn, children laugh as they chase each other along the shoreline, and life flows with a rhythm as old as the tides. But that calm is about to shatter. On the horizon, wooden ships slice through the waves, massive, unfamiliar, and menacing. Their sails bear the emblem of a distant empire, and on board are men who speak in strange tongues, carrying weapons that glint like fire under the sun. Among them, Ferdinand Magellan, a man driven not just by discovery, but by conquest and faith, a faith that will demand submission, no matter the cost. The islands, once divided by small rivalries, but united by shared traditions, are about to be thrust into a storm they never saw coming. And with it will come promises of salvation and centuries of suffering. What began as an encounter will spiral into something far greater, a battle for identity, power, and survival that will shape the Philippines for generations. From colonization to corruption, from resilience to rebellion, every chapter of this nation's history traces back to these first moments of contact. But this story isn't just about the past. It's about the forces still at play today. Forces that make the Philippines one of the most talked about nations in 2025. And to understand the present, we must return to the beginning, where it all started, with sails on the horizon and a silence before the storm. The first days of contact felt almost harmless. The strangers brought gifts, shiny trinkets, strange fabrics, even food and drink the islanders had never tasted before. Curiosity filled the villages. Children whispered about the towering men with pale skin, and leaders welcomed what they thought were new allies. But danger was closing in. What no one realized was that these visitors had come not just to trade, but to claim. Beneath the smiles and blessings were maps already marked, plans already written, plans that would change the islands forever. The cross they planted in the sand wasn't just a symbol of faith. It was a silent declaration that this land, and its people, now belonged to someone else. As weeks turned to months, tensions grew. The gifts that once charmed the villagers now came with expectations. Taxes were demanded, allegiance was enforced, and when some resisted, the punishment was swift and brutal. Villages were burned to the ground, families were torn apart. The air that once carried the songs of fishermen and farmers now rang with the crack of muskets and the cries of the wounded. But even in the shadows of fear, sparks of defiance began to burn. Leaders like Lapu-Lapu saw through the lies. In whispered meetings under the cover of night, warriors sharpened blades and vowed to defend their land, their families, their very way of life. The Battle of Mactan would become their first stand, and their first warning to the colonizers that the spirit of these islands would not be easily broken. Yet, the tide of history was relentless. For every victory of resistance, there were waves of suffering. Forced labor under the encomienda system, sacred traditions stripped away, and an entire nation slowly reshaped under the weight of foreign rule. Churches rose where ancestral shrines once stood, Spanish names replaced native ones, and a deep wound, the kind that seeps into generations, was carved into the soul of the people. What no one realized then was that these early battles were just the beginning, because centuries later, long after the last Spanish ship had left, the scars of conquest would still be there, woven into politics, culture, and the quiet struggles of ordinary Filipinos. And in 2025, those same scars would be at the heart of a global debate, a question about sin, morality, and how history never truly lets go. This was no longer just a story of colonization. It had become a story of survival, of a nation wrestling with its past while being judged by the world. And as the tide of history rose higher, one truth became undeniable. The Philippines was forever changed. Not by choice, but by force. The dawn of April 27, 1521, was unnervingly quiet. The shoreline of Mactan glowed faintly under the first light, waves lapping gently against the sand, as if the island itself didn't know that history was about to be written in blood. Then, the silence shattered. From the horizon, the Spaniards advanced, their armor flashing like shards of the sun, their weapons ready. At their head, Ferdinand Magellan, confident, almost arrogant, believed this would be an easy victory. After all, what chance did a band of island warriors have against steel, muskets, and the will of an empire? But what he didn't expect was their courage. From the dense mangroves and rocky shores, Lapu-Lapu and his warriors emerged, barefoot, outnumbered, and armed with nothing more than spears, bolos, and an unbreakable resolve. The clash was immediate and brutal. Muskets cracked, arrows tore through the air, and the cries of the dying rose like a terrible chorus. Yet the islanders would not break. With every charge, every roar, every strike, they fought not just for land, but for freedom, for the right to exist on their own soil, unclaimed and unbroken. And in that storm of chaos and fury, Magellan fell. The man who arrived to conquer left the earth as nothing more than another body on the shore, his empire forced to retreat, his ambitions swallowed by the waves. But victory came at a price. The sands of Mactan were stained red, families wept for their dead, and the people knew that this fight, this fleeting taste of triumph, would not be the end. The colonizers would return, stronger, more ruthless, more determined to bend the islands to their will. Still, the Battle of Mactan had lit a fire. It proved that resistance was possible, that even the smallest voices could roar against the greatest powers, and that fire would burn through every uprising, every revolution, every act of defiance for centuries to come. The shores of Mactan eventually fell silent, but the echoes of that battle never faded. The colonizers returned, stronger, more determined, and for more than 300 years, the islands bent under the weight of a foreign crown. Generations were born and died under the shadow of rule, their language, faith, and very identity, reshaped by powers oceans away. Yet, the spark lit that morning in 1521 never went out. It burned quietly in whispered prayers, in secret gatherings, in the songs of farmers, and the chants of rebels. It flared in every uprising, from the revolts of the Katipuneros to the cries for independence in the 20th century. Every act of defiance traced its roots back to that single truth. Mactan had proven that the Filipino spirit could be wounded, but never destroyed. Centuries later, the scars of colonization remain, in politics, in culture, in the way the world views this nation. And now in 2025, as the Philippines stands in the global spotlight judged for its sins, those scars tell a deeper story. A story of survival, of resilience, and of a people still wrestling with the legacies forced upon them. History doesn't end. It lingers. It shapes the present, whispers into the future, and reminds us that the battles we think are over often live on in ways we cannot see. The story of the Philippines is not just about conquest or colonization. It's about the unbreakable will to endure, to adapt, and to rise again. Because in the end, nations, like people, are not defined by the wounds they've suffered, but by the strength it takes to carry them. And so, as the waves continue to kiss the shores of Mactan, one truth remains, steady and eternal. You can occupy a land, but you can never conquer its soul. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. There are countless more chapters of history, untold, forgotten, or deliberately buried, waiting to be uncovered. Subscribe now, and join us as we shine a light on the stories the world has tried to erase. Because history isn't just about the past. It's the key to understanding the present and shaping the future.